And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in issue 537. And I shared with folks the meeting notes doc there, which I'll spam again for folks that are just joining. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees. And quickly, just to remind everybody, these calls and all comms on the RFC's repo are covered under a code of conduct that we ask you to please abide by. On these calls, if someone's talking, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. And just be mindful and thoughtful to others as we talk about work in flight. One quick announcement here that I was wanted to put on folks' radar. Our team has been working pretty diligently on a backlog of high priority bugs and decided to stay heads down for the month of March to try to really put an emphasis on cleaning up those issues. And so we're going to essentially take a pause on RFC calls specifically. So this call that happens every Wednesday won't happen in the month of March, but we'll be back in April. And notably, this doesn't mean that RFCs can't be ratified and we can't have discussions about them async. We'll continue to do that. And we may even have one-off conversations, as I noted last week, specifically about the distributions RFC. So I may still be setting up that call that I know some folks were interested in contributing to, but just want to make the note that, yeah, these calls, the regular scheduled calls won't be happening in March. I appreciate the note, Jordan, that you sent earlier, that they were still on the calendar. So I've removed them now, and that should be updated and reflected in our public calendar for folks that are following along there as well. So the next RFC call then should be, I think, Wednesday, April 6th is the right date. So a little bit of a pause here, but yeah, the hope is that we'll get over this backlog and get back to sort of developing features and improving. We have a pretty good backlog to date, actually, of accepted RFCs as well that we'd like to get to as we're talking about new things as well. So bit of announcement there. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share? If not, then we'll jump right into our relatively small agenda today. The first issue that we have here is RFC 522. This is the adding NPM, adding options for NPM diff to ignore white space carriage returns, end of line and carriage return. And I think, Roy, you had put this on the docket or left this on the docket to be ratified, I think.
Yes. So I just I revealed it and left the comment there. So I think it's the RFC itself is good to go. We just need to clean it up a little bit. And maybe the only open question that they have there that I might bring into attention, but honestly, like I really don't think that's the case, but like whether or not we should just change NPM diff so that ignoring carried return at the end is just the default behavior. And I believe like I believe it's NPM diff goal is to like surface all types of possible changes, and like I believe that would include like this metadata, like, and it's fairly easy to just opt into ignoring them with the new option. So I would be inclined to just use the option whenever the flag is provided, or you just set that config true in your NPM RFC file and you get that new behavior. So yeah, I see that Oscar there that opened the RFC already started contributing to the JS diff dependency to actually implement this behavior there, because it's not implemented in the package that provides the diff yet. So that's awesome. Like, looks like they're engaged, like championed this for this feature. So looks ready to go. So yeah, but if folks really have strong opinions on having that enabled by default, feel free to comment there too. We can follow along.
What's Git's default behavior? Git diffs?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. I don't think the default in Git is to ignore, but I might be wrong. I don't have a ton of experience in the working in a team with Windows and Unix users at the same time.
Yeah, we should just double check what the experience is there for
Yeah, well, and it's different too. I know Git also has this option that I believe I have enabled in my global config for a long while to just normalize. So even when you are working in these situations with half a team on Windows, half a team on Unix, there is a setting to just normalize everything whenever you commit to the repo, if I'm not.
If we're trying to, whenever it makes sense, match Git defaults and support Git diff commands, does it make sense to respect Git diff config like that too? Because then I feel like the desire should be that if I type Git diff, whatever happens there should, like with or without arguments, should pretty much match what happens when I do npm diff. Like, and I know the argument names are slightly different, but like if the concepts are the same, like if I've tweaked my diff output or my diff viewer, that npm diff would pipe into the same one. Like that seems like a really nice property.
Wes, go ahead.
We actually have the opportunity to be a little bit more permissive than Git safely in this environment. Remember that Git diff needs to be able to work against arbitrary content, but if we're trying to use npm diff to resolve things like package JSON files, merges on an automated basis, which I think is what you're doing here, we can safely ignore those CRs, whereas the Git guys can't. So limiting npm to what Git's doing there might not be the best choice for the community.
Yeah, that's a good point. My argument in favor of just not turning it on by default, it's basically like correctness over the flexibility, right? So anyone can just opt in, and like if your team is comfortable with that, you can just put that in your npm-rc and have that by default. But I just think that for the default experience, like it's probably better for the community to just err on the side of safeness. So that was my thought there. So yeah, and to also answer to Jordan, it's definitely the goal to kind of like mimic Git diff, and like we've been inheriting like all the config options from it. So it might be a very good idea to maybe in the future just plug directly into whatever is defined already in the GitHub.
Because like obviously npm config would take precedence, but like if someone already has taken the time to set up that Git diff config, then like, you know, it seems unfortunate to force them to duplicate it.
Yeah, I'm just concerned we're might fall into the same trap that we have with like Git ignore like precedents with Git config precedents, etc., and like the expectation that we're very tied to those two. But I also do think that it'd be nice if you can just set things in one place. But if we have different options and we have different expectations potentially, and I actually don't mind the idea that we could be more permissive potentially, as Wes was noting. But yeah, I do think they're two separate like commands, so we should have separate config. I think I don't know. It's maybe up for the ecosystem to help normalize it. Config is one of those things that like I know we've talked about even at the Node tooling working group, and it's you can't get people on the same page. It's you introduce a new standard by trying to consolidate standards.
Okay, yeah, but with that in mind, with that idea of just we're just basically using Git diff as kind of the reference for the implementation, and like it's just natural to accept these new options as they come along, as the community surface the need for them. I think that was the idea since the beginning. Like we ship a minimal set of viable options for npm diff, and like we can grow it like as it becomes clear that the community wants them. Like we have people championing for it, like we have in this case here. So I'm totally thumbs up. I think we should ratify it.
Cool. Let's do it.
Awesome.
Can I put you in charge of doing that today at some point?
Yes.
Cool. Moving on to package distributions 519. From last week, I noted that we should probably have a bit of a working group to update this since my time has been very limited. And there's been a couple conversations and asks to also introduce a new RFC for optional dependencies. So I will keep it on my radar to actually set up that call. We could even consider it to be like a deep dive session, but I'm probably going to call it like a working session where we'll have a shared HackMD where we can work on essentially both the distributions RFC to get in a good place, as well as potentially whatever we can call it, conditional optional dependencies improvements or something like that. So that is the action item there. Did folks have any updates or anything they want to ask about the distributions RFC though? Any feedback other than we're going to do a bit more work together on this? Cool. Yeah, notably in terms of how I look at this, I don't imagine distributions landing until mid to later this year, just as a FYI, and it's probably going to be flagged, so potentially introduced as a on an optional feature that you can opt into before it becomes something that we're able to support by default. To set up meeting. Okay, and that brings us to our last agenda item, which is issue 482. NPM should use standard error for errors. I'm not sure if Luke is on here, but maybe you want to give an update.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so this is not my RFC, but it's I left a comment on there. And so this is asking for standard error for errors. And I just wanted to raise concerns I had and then bring it to the RFC community just to see what other thoughts people had about it. But basically this breaks the ability for some output to be passed to other programs, specifically Json output. So certain errors are treated like, I feel like there's two classes of errors. There's like ones that we don't know are going to happen, and those should maybe get printed to standard error. But then there's ones like eResolve, or if you npm install React and you misspell it and that doesn't exist, you get an error. But if you're in JSON mode and you're piping that to JQ or something, you're not able to parse that if it's on standard error because we already print all of our logs there. And it feels wrong to me to switch outputs, switch streams between standard error and standard out, depending on a flag like JSON. So and there's been issues opened about this in the past. And we currently have a few that I've gone through and linked in the RFC. But so I don't have another RFC, but I just wanted to bring this one up because I don't think we should print all errors to standard error, or we should have some way to distinguish between types of errors we should and shouldn't print to standard error.
I mean,
and so
when I pass --JSON, to me, the only guarantee I expect and require is that if it succeeds, standard out is only parsable JSON. Which is the same if you make an AJAX request to a web server and request JSON in the headers. If it succeeds, you expect JSON. If it doesn't, maybe the server's nice and gives you JSON, but if it's a 503 error or something, maybe you're not going to get JSON. You simply can't expect the error path to give you a valid, like well-formed response. So I think that it would make sense to me that errors are always printed on standard error. They are not guaranteed to be parsable. The JSON flag doesn't change that. And just like every other shell tool, the exit code and standard out, standard error are used idiomatically to give you that information. If we want to then go beyond that and make standard error output parsable, awesome. But that's a very difficult guarantee, because like you could have a memory error in the middle of your process and crash, and like you're not going to reliably trap that on every system that NPM supports. So like I think it's just, if you have an expectation that standard error output is parsable, like you're going to be sad no matter what we do. So don't have that expectation, you know.
Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I agree with all that. The one thing I wanted to add is that the one thing I don't want to make impossible is if you have a default log level, which is notice, I believe, and we are able to print JSON output for an error that's recoverable, like, you know, out of memory errors, stuff like that. We're not going to be able to print JSON for that, and that should be error paths that, you know, all code, you know, all libraries consuming this should expect and be able to handle those. But ones where we are, like, you know, registry errors come to mind because those are already formed as JSON, I believe, and so there's more information there. And so if you did want to pipe that to JQ or something, we currently make that impossible with the default log level, because you'll never get well-formed output. You'll never get well-formed JSON output on standard error, because that's where logs go, and those are not JSON. So unless there's some way to, you know, we wanted to make new line delimited JSON logs in JSON mode, which is outside of the scope of this discussion. But that's my only concern, where I want to not make that path where we are able to pass that error impossible for people to consume that way.
So what's the strategy going forward? Because I agree with both Jordan and Luke, your assessment of this. It's kind of like, what is the contract that we're setting users up to expect when they pass, let's say, the JSON flag? That's how it sounds like. Are we, like, if we error, as Jordan noted, for any other reason that isn't, let's say, a recoverable error or an error in which we're throwing within the CLI itself, like, we cannot control that, and we're going to, yeah, we're not going to be able to pass back a parsable like JSON response. So it seems like we're like, that's like impossible to, that contract's impossible to keep. So do we just say as much in documentation, or like, is there a change here to how we handle all errors that we want to make?
There is one change. Well, so either way, we're going to have to make changes, because currently, I believe JSON errors specifically get sent to standard error, and that's different than other error paths. So I think the number one action item I would have from this is decide whether we want some errors to go to standard error and some to go to standard out, or if we want to say, you know, be consistent and all errors always go to standard error. And if you know that you're going to handle JSON, you are passing, you know, separate flag for log level to passing silent wouldn't work, because silent has special code paths that also hide output, but some combination of that we document and say, if you are expecting to handle JSON errors from the CLI, like, this is the flags you'd have to pass. Or and I just don't like the any indirection of, like, we try to guess user intent, which we've talked about on these calls before, where, like, if you pass JSON mode, we change your log level or something like that. I feel like all of those would be non-starters for me, of like switching flags based on other flags which are seemingly unrelated.
And do you have a recommendation one way or another? I'm not reading. I'm trying to read
Yeah,
through the
sorry.
discussion.
Yeah, I have, my recommendation would be, let's see. My recommendation, it feels like it goes against, I'm also looking for best practices here if anyone has any, but is all output goes to standard out and all logs go to standard error. And output is defined as anything that the CLI thinks that you could either, that is useful to the end user. So, you know, in certain cases that is going to be errors, like you resolve errors in certain modes, like those are going to get printed to standard out, only so that we don't have to ever switch between standard out and standard error in some cases to make it parsable for users.
So I agree with your statement, but with the addition that if someone is passing the JSON flag, there's an additional constraint that the output must always be JSON.
We can't hold that contract true, just like you said.
Well, or sorry, when the program, the standard out output must always be JSON when the program succeeds. Is the more accurate constraint.
Yes.
When the program fails, all bets are off. It's an error path. Like, do whatever you want. But like, yeah.
Okay.
But otherwise, everything you said is spot on for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I think that's all I wanted to resolve from this. I don't know if I need to write another RFC just to, or maybe just leaving a comment on this is enough, because I just want a decision record, because we have people asking both ways and issues. And so I want to write up something that we can point people to and say, this is the reason that you are getting what you think is an error, and it's not on standard error.
Is it possible that you could just write it in, not like necessarily the form on our RFC, but yeah, like just something that's like, I don't know, like I would totally be okay with you ratifying just like a document even of the current implementation, or like where we're going with that, like a +1 to just like even ratifying, like this is how we're going to handle these.
Yeah,
cases.
I was going to propose just maybe some lightweight RFC, like then we can just document this, all these ideas. It can just live there in an accepted RFC. Doesn't need to be anything too complex, or, you know, just something light, and then we can point people, like you're saying in other discussions, and even guide future implementations, because I know it's possibly something we'll tackle in the future. UI UX revamp of the CLI, so it's definitely good to be there for future reference.
Yeah, I think like just leaving in an issue isn't as formal. Like that's kind of like, I guess what I'm saying. And it doesn't have to be as massive as a full-blown RFC, but can just be like, in these situations, this is how we do X. Yeah. Is
there a place in the docs where stuff like this lives currently? That feels like maybe a good candidate. I've had in my head for a while to write something like this, like how the CLI thinks about logging and display.
Yep, the logging section that we made the other day. You can
I can't remember where I put that.
Oh no, like in the docs itself, npm docs, we now have a section called logging in using npm, I think it is. And so you could just essentially amend that whole page with any kind of additional input you want to add there, Luke.
Okay, that sounds good. And reading my comment again, there is one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that is whether we treat the change from currently all JSON errors go to standard error, and whether if we change that to standard out, if we treat that as a breaking change or not. Because it got changed in npm 7 as a bug fix, I believe, where we just switched that code path from basically console.log to console error. And that broke other people's stuff, but we kept it in as a bug fix because someone was relying on that behavior, which I don't know the full history of that behavior, but if we change that, how do we want to treat that for Semver?
I'm
sorry, I can instead of just leaving it open, I can say my initial thought was saving that for npm 9, but seeing how we want to, we have a current focus on fixing priority 1 bugs, and there's a few priority 1 bugs that this would fix. I'm now leaning towards it just being a bug fix on a bug fix.
Yeah. I don't have any strong feelings one way or another. We're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. So it's sort of yeah. No good deed goes unpunished, as is the case.
Yeah.
So I'd rather ship it as I don't know. Maybe we could ship it as a minor instead of saying it's a bug patch. We're saying it's an improvement, bug fix, right?
Yeah. I also think if I add this, if I had more information to the docs about this and we have somewhere to point, it's less likely to, at least there's an explanation. I think in the past when we made this bug fix, it was basically just a 1-line change pull request that we made, and then people were, it broke them unexpectedly, where I think it's impossible to never break anybody, but if we have somewhere to point users to when they have questions about this, I think that could go a long way.
It's only breaking if it's documented, right? Like, so this is the lack of documentation has been our biggest problem that we've tried to combat here, and which is why people's expectations are a little bit all over the place. So I think that you're right, that if we float this, and I would suggest as a minor with alongside the like clear docs, then this is actually an improvement, right? And we can set people's expectations accordingly. So yeah. Cool. Any other feedback on this? If not, I'd like to open up the floor for folks if they have any other topics that they want to bring up, or questions, or anything else that is on folks' minds. Fritz, I think
I
saw
have
it.
some.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hold on. I got my cover on my camera apparently. So I was working an issue, and they mentioned that npm audit wasn't working properly, and after a little bit of back and forth, come to find out like they were recommended to run npm audit from a global install of a package. So I don't think this is really RFC worthy necessarily, but we do need to be careful about recommendations for action if they don't apply to the command, because npm audit does not work at all for.
One separately, like npm audit fix -g should probably immediately error out, as should npm update -g, and any -g command that includes an explicit save
Right.
dev, save peer. Like there's a ton of global commands that just shouldn't work, but they currently either silently do the wrong thing or like fail in a weird way.
Yeah, if you do run -g with npm audit right now, it does give a sensible error for that. But yeah, it'd be good to look at the others. But yeah, in this specific case, like we really should not be recommending a user course of action.
So, and the best way to recommend that is probably just to ensure it doesn't work, right? Like, is that right?
Yeah, right. Well, so when they install globally, like the problem is that, say I install the AWS CLI globally, right? There's some audit warnings, and then it says, hey, you can fix this with npm audit fix.
So we should be removing audit from in global installs. Okay.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily should be removing audit from global installs, but we should remove the recommendation that you can fix it because you can't. And I don't know if there's other places where there's similar things that we could look out for. And thanks, Jordan, for pointing out, like, maybe we should look at global commands in general.
I feel like this could be, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to point, there's the opposite of it. something that me and Jordan we paired in the past. But NPM Fund, on the other hand, should probably start accepting global, like a lot of tools that publish like meant to be installed with global install, like can benefit from also just having a global NPM Fund output. So just saying, like on the other hand, we also have some commands that might start need to supporting global.
Just one thing to clarify, and because you mentioned this, Jordan, maybe you know, but npm update-g was historically in v6 was to update all globally installed packages to latest. Did that change? Are we not doing that anymore? Is that broken?
I mean, if that works still correctly, then that's fine. But in general, I think there's also a huge bunch of threads about npm update suddenly failing to update package JSON in npm 7 plus.
We fixed that.
Okay, but like, it's sort of, in general, it's kind of weird, like, because it seems like almost all these commands were built with a project in mind, and then like they kind of also do something for global. And it's certainly a valuable use case to say, hey, I want to update all my global packages, maybe, but like, especially since one of those is npm, and that can cause your entire npm installation to break, like it's sort of a dangerous thing to run. And because there's no package JSON, there's no way to even track what's been updated from what to what. So it's like, I'm not even sure, even though that's a thing that's reasonable to want, I'm not sure it's a thing that's reasonable to make easy. Like, it kind of seems like if someone is taking the trouble to install something globally, they should like explicitly manage that thing one at a time. So I don't know. It's like, I just think that there hasn't been a lot of holistic thought about local versus global and npm's API in the modern world where global packages themselves are deprecated and discouraged. Like, yeah.
I think maybe we should take a look at this when we look at v9 breaking changes around config. Maybe we also look at global a little bit and make sure that we're doing something smart there. I kind of feel like, you know, the global update thing is like what people expect from brew and stuff like that. So they might expect the same from npm.
Right, but like, yeah, and that's true. But when you do that with brew, right, not only do you have no idea what version you updated from or when that was updated, but also like the folks that have a ton of things installed with brew, like they tend to want to just, oh, forget it, let's just update everything, and then things break in their system and they have to laboriously figure out why. So like, it's,
yeah,
there's always things in computing that are reasonable to want and easy to make easy, but doing that causes a lot of foot guns, and that's what I think this is.
Yeah, so we've had on our radar for a long time, like improving npm update in general, and the place that I see this done best, or I see it referenced the most, is npm check updates package, where there's an interactive mode. There's the ability for you to update all packages to latest, like very easily. Like those are two specific features that I hear are often asked of npm update, and because we don't support those two specific use cases, it seems like, okay, like people have to reach for a tool. Those specifically we should support, and we ideally will support. Come this time next year, ideally we are supporting that. Like, it's a pretty good time frame to say that by next year we should have those kinds of features in npm. The use case of doing that interactively, like, should apply not just to project level, but also globally, which I think would alleviate maybe some of your concerns there, Jordan. So yeah, like, I do think that update does have some improvements that we should add. The number one that we were seeing that we did just recently fix is saving back to package JSON, which you mentioned, which was a major pain point for folks, since they often were using npm update to manage their package JSON, and we sort of eliminated that use case in V7, and we fixed that now. So yeah.
While we're taking a look at npm update, I don't actually know if it does this or not, but when I get a CVE for a transitive dependency in an application with a lock file, having a command where I can just say, update that thing everywhere it occurs in my lock file to the latest in range thing, like that would be very useful, because that's the fastest way you can resolve most CVE warnings. Like npm audit fix can do it, but like there's unless you can npm audit fix a single package, like sometimes you want a minimal diff and you don't want to just fix everything. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, would you expect it to maybe set an override in your package file?
I would expect it to update my lock file as if I had used an override to an in-range update. Like overrides should be a last resort, right? Like it's great that I can have them, but like it's better if I don't have to.
Yeah, it's just like, how do you keep that that option that you just said? How do you keep a reference to it, either in the log file or in the package JSON, or how was that
Well,
generated?
it'd be the log file. It'd be the same thing as if I'd typed npm install direct dependency at the version I'm already using, and it just happens to update all the transitive dependencies for me. But like a smaller diff than that, because it's just updating those transitive defs.
I think I was confused because you said at first you said the latest transitive dependency, but then you said in range.
Latest in range. Yeah.
Yes, latest in range. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Yeah. See that we've also heard some folks asking for the ability to break the contract and get latest no matter what outside of ranges. So like even breaking like majors has been an ask for some folks, and that's where I think overrides probably is the right place. But yeah, what you're asking for makes sense.
I have one more thing to maybe bring up to the group. Issue 4460, which I did close, but it talks about missing integrity entries for the registry in an older package lock, and the expectation that npm install should warn and or fix these. I just thought it was interesting because there are, use cases where, or there are instances where an integrity might not exist. So this could result in an RFC.
Like potentially also third-party registries might
Yeah, there's all sorts of use cases where you might not have an integrity, and the suggestion here that seems maybe sensible is warning when there isn't one.
Right. I mean, if those scenarios are something actionable, like my company's private registry is failing to provide an integrity value, that's something I would want to be told about. Or if it's like this category of dependency can't have an integrity value, like it's a Git dep, maybe you want to look for something that's in a registry. That seems like it would have value. But like, if it's something like npm has a bug in the registry side, like that's not actionable for me. I don't know what other scenarios would be, but like if they're listed, I could probably pick and choose the ones that make sense.
Yeah, I mean, the big one here, I think, is if the package lock was generated originally before we had the integrity data for each package, like it's not there in the package lock.
But like you said in your comment when you closed that, npm install doesn't change the package lock, but it does often. So
yeah,
like,
it can. It just doesn't generally if you don't specify a package spec, right?
But like it does seem to me like it would be useful if I type npm install and something that my lock file lacks integrity for suddenly has one provided by my registry. It kind of seems like I should have that added at that time.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a good argument. And it may be worth us changing that behavior there.
Yeah, self-healing lock file is exactly the phrase I would think of. Darcy said that in chat.
think that is our intention.
We had
So
it
we
coming up
should-
for the opposite, right? Like getting rid of integrity values for Git tabs. So it might be a good thing to explore.
Specifically, the warning is what you're saying, Roy? Or the
No, the
self-healing
idea-
aspect?
Yeah, I'm speaking of the self-healing aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two things that we can do here, which are good things to note, Fritzy. Is it possible, can I ask you to maybe add 2 separate issues for in our status board, or is there issues that we're already tracking for this? Oh, you're muted.
I can reopen the existing issue and just clarify it on what we intend to do.
I don't think we have to reopen it. It's 4460, is that right?
Yeah.
Quickly look at that. Yeah, let's reopen it, I guess. And then,
Okay.
yeah, and then prioritize it accordingly.
Sounds good.
Cool. Any other topics folks want to bring up? We have about 15 minutes left. Those were 2 good ones. If not, I will give you 15 minutes back. Roy, did you have something?
Maybe just a last reminder for March before we go.
Right. So yet again, just for folks that may have not been on the call before or just tuning in, we're going to take a bit of a break, a pause on the RFC calls being live streamed for March, but we will still be reviewing and giving feedback in the RFC's repo async from our team. So the next RFC call will be Wednesday, April 6th, 2022. So taking a bit of pause here, I'm gonna stay heads down and try to clean up a bit of our backlog as a team. And then, yeah, we'll be back in April. So appreciate everybody that's joined today and all the other RFCs that we've had lately. And we will see you in April. Cheers.